All right, today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to conduct a corporate autopsy on a name that for a long time felt completely invincible: Nokia. We're going to break down one of the most incredible collapses in business history and figure out exactly how a tech titan lost its crown, seemingly overnight. To really get how staggering this fall was, you have to understand just how high up they were. Back in the early 2000s, Nokia had an unbelievable 40% of the entire global mobile phone market. Think about that. They weren't just a market leader. They basically were the market. Their brand was as famous as Coca-Cola. And that leads us to the big mystery we're unpacking today. How does a company with that much power, that much talent, and that much market share just completely miss the boat? How did the undisputed king of mobile phones fail to see the smartphone revolution barreling right towards them? To answer that, we've got to rewind the clock. Let's go back to the beginning, to a time when Nokia truly, absolutely ruled the world, and it felt like nothing could ever touch them. I mean, seriously, think about it. For millions and millions of us, our very first mobile phone was a Nokia, right? They were famous for being practically indestructible, super easy to use, and they had all these cool, innovative designs. This was a Finnish company that had literally conquered the globe. They were, without a doubt, at the absolute top of the world. But here's the thing. Even with all that success, beneath that shiny surface, some pretty big problems were starting to brew. And in a really strange twist, the very things that made Nokia so successful were about to become the anchors that would drag them to the bottom. The heart of the issue was bureaucracy. Now, at Nokia, this wasn't just about filling out paperwork. Success had created this enormous, complex organization that was totally focused on protecting its existing business. It became a well-oiled machine, all right? But it was a machine designed to perfect the past, not to invent the future. And that bureaucracy? Well, it led to a whole cascade of problems. You had this rigid structure where fresh ideas really struggled to get heard. The company's reaction time to anything new was painfully slow, and there was this deep cultural resistance to any real change. Nokia was basically building a fortress, but they were also walling themselves in. So, just as Nokia was becoming more rigid and slow on the inside, the outside world was getting ready to unleash a wave of change so big it demanded speed and flexibility above all else. You could call it a smartphone tsunami. This quote just captures the moment perfectly. You know, when Apple launched the iPhone back in 2007, it didn't just introduce a new phone. It introduced a completely new set of rules for the entire game. And while the future was being written, right then and there, Nokia was still playing by the old rulebook. And this set the stage for a classic David versus Goliath story, but with a twist. See, it wasn't just Apple. Other, much nimbler competitors, like Samsung, they also saw this huge opening and they just charged right through it. And this is where you can really see the two strategies just completely split. Nokia was rigid, slow, obsessed with its long, perfect hardware development cycles. Samsung, on the other hand, incredibly versatile. Their whole strategy wasn't to build the perfect phone on day one. Nope. It was to observe and iterate. They'd watch the market, push out products fast, learn from what worked and what didn't, and just get better and better. That approach, it was perfectly suited for the chaotic, fast-paced new world of smartphones. So while Nokia was kind of trapped in these endless internal debates about what the perfect strategy should be, Samsung was out there in the real world, learning, adapting, and winning over customers. And eventually, they took that top spot that Nokia used to own. So that brings us to the end of our autopsy. With all the evidence laid out, what are the final findings? What was the official cause of death for this once mighty giant? Well, the numbers really speak for themselves. In 2007, the same year the iPhone came out, Nokia held that dominant 40% of the market. Just 6 years later, 6 years, that share had collapsed to less than 5%. It is, without a doubt, one of the fastest and most brutal corporate collapses in modern history. But look, this isn't just a story about one company. It's a huge cautionary tale with some powerful lessons. It shows us how incredible success can actually make you blind. It shows how your internal culture can be even more important than the product you sell. And that, in a world that changes this fast, being able to adapt will always, always beat a rigid plan. And maybe most importantly, you can never, ever stop watching the market. And that leaves us with one last, pretty provocative thought.
Nokia's story might be history, but the lessons are absolutely timeless. So as you look around at the dominant, seemingly untouchable companies of today, ask yourself, which one of them is getting a little too comfortable? Which one is becoming a bureaucracy, checking its old rule book while the future is being written by someone else? It's definitely something to think about.